Happy to introduce our guests. I'm going to start with Jaden J. Ellis, who is a second year student at UC Berkeley School of Law, raised in Macon, Georgia, and attended Barnard from 2016 to 2020. While a Barnard Bear, Jaden studied political science and economics. Currently, Jaden is a Berkeley Center for Law and Business Scholar, a startup at Berkeley Law and Form and Fund Fellow, and an editor for the Berkeley Business Law and Journal Symposium. Jaden is also an active member of UC Berkeley's Law Students of African Descent and Women of Color Collective. Welcome, Jaden. We also have Kayla Hug. Kayla is a 2L at NYU Law School from Baltimore, Maryland. She graduated from Barnard College of Columbia University in 2017 with a BA in political science and a minor in Africana studies, where she developed a curiosity in the law and a passion for equity and justice. Before law school, Kayla taught 7th grade English in West Baltimore and obtained her MS Ed from Johns Hopkins University School of Education. She also worked as a corporate legal assistant at Davis Polk and Wardell LLP in their New York office and served as an SEO law fellow at Jenner and Block LLP. At NYU Law, Kayla is involved with BALSA as the private professional development co-chair and serves as a labor and employment chair for the Sports Law Association. She is also part of the Racial Equity Strategies Clinic through NYU Law's Clinic program, where she is working on voting rights litigation in Houston, Texas, as an intern for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. She is also a research assistant for Deborah Archer, the co-faculty director of NYU Center on Race, Inequality, and the law, and the first Black president of the ACLU. Outside of NYU, Kayla is a legal intern for the legal department at BSC Global, the parent company of the Brooklyn Nets and the Barclays Center. Kayla will be spending her 2L summer at Ropes and Gray LLP, hoping to focus on private equity law. Last summer, Kayla served as a summer associate at Quinn Emanuel and Urquhart LLP, where she worked on a variety of litigation matters, including a $68 million contract dispute for a celebrity client, and completed a secondment at Accenture. She received a return offer from Quinn Emanuel and will be joining them for a touchback during her 2L summer. Welcome, Kayla. And then finally, we have Pilar Laitano Fejeda, who is a JD candidate at NYU School of Law, class of 2023. Before law school, Pilar interned in-house at Sony Music Entertainment. During 1L summer, Pilar interned at the Special Prosecutions Office of the Westchester District Attorney's Office. Pilar is currently a member of LALSA, LSA. Thank you. And managing editor of operations of the Journal of Business and Law at NYU. Pilar will be joining Simpson, Thatcher, and Bartlett as a summer associate in 2022 for her 2L summer. Pilar received her BA cum laude from Barnard College of Columbia University in 2020, where she double majored in political science and economics. During her time at Barnard, Pilar was involved in Model UN and did political science empirical research with Professor Miller, who recently published one of the projects she assisted in a book. Pilar is originally from Brazil, but New York is now home. Thank you all very much. So we're going to go ahead and get started with some questions. So the first question, I want to focus on the before law school part. Can you tell us a little bit about what steps you took to prepare for law school? And that's open to anybody.
Yeah, well, I can jump right in on that. I was looking at the questions before the panel started, and I actually realized, I mean, as you're preparing for law school, of course, you're going to do the things like, preparing for the LSAT, choosing your recommenders, who you want to write your recommendations, and working on your personal statement. But I think the step that really was really important for me before even doing all that was researching and networking within the pre-law community and the law community that I found amongst my peers, but also my mentors in Columbia and Barnard specifically. So I did a lot of work to do like informational, sit down with people, reach out to people, like cold emails, whatever it took to like for people who I looked up to and were sort of doing the things that I wanted to do and were going to the law schools that I was interested in. And sort of from getting that insight and like advice from each one of them, it really helped narrow my path as I was actually preparing to write, like pick the best test prep courses. I was able to ask a bunch of people, well, what worked for you, what didn't? And I was able to narrow my options down from there. Same thing with my personal statement, right? I kind of built up this network of mentors. So by the time I was ready to have a draft, I was able to send it out to so many people who were able to review it for me. So I feel like sort of what you all are doing right now, taking time to learn from people who have already gone through it, really made that process much more easy for me. And I had insight, like I wasn't just going into it blind. And I just think that was a really key piece of it for me, was really seeking out mentors who could help me navigate that process.
I definitely agree with that. I think law school is much different than college for applying, that there are right answers in a lot of things that you will benefit from asking people. How to build your college list is very different than how to build your law school list. What you look for in a college is different than when you look in a law school. So just definitely talking to people that have already done it, and just try to seek out people that are honest. Like I am brutally honest on how I chose NYU and like how everything, like what the legal markets looks like and like why I made the right choice. So that I definitely agree with that. And then just in case you are not like a senior at the moment, some early things that I think are valuable to do is definitely get to know professors. You don't want to become a senior and have no professor that even barely knows who you are. That's going to make the whole recommendation thing much more stressful and awkward than it needs to be. So definitely build those relationships, and then it's just going to be very natural. And they're going to be like, yeah, of course, I'll write you one. So I always recommend that for people that still have time to do those. And then, I don't know, just very much, this is not what you want to hear, but just study for the LSAT. That's really important, and getting a good grade will impact actually your entire career. So don't overlook it. Just, work hard. I hated the test, so I'm not saying it's fun, but.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of what you guys have said. The only thing I would really add is just not being afraid to take a step back and looking at where you see your career and your lifestyle going in general, and figuring out if not just school, but like the career path of an attorney is right for you and what that would entail, and just where you see, law school is just one step, just like undergrad is. And so you really just want to take a step back and get a perspective on where you see yourself and what you want for your life also.
Thank you for that. Speaking of the LSAT, as you all I'm sure know, there are now two ways that you can test to get into law school, the LSAT and the GRE. So I would like to know from you all which test you took and how you prepared to take that test.
So I took the LSAT, as you might have guessed, and I actually took it very, very early. I took it in the summer between my sophomore and junior year because that summer I had a very chill job. Like I was an RA for Barnard and I did tours, like I wasn't doing much. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it this summer. And, it was great because my last summer I actually did a lot of my job. Like I had a real 9-to-5 job. So that's when I took it. My general statement for it is that I found that when you prepare for it, the score you get on the test, at least for me, was very fair to what I was scoring at. Like I got actually the exact mean between the tests that I was taking. So when I got my grade, I was like, yeah, this is what I deserve. So just it is not a fun test. I love tests and I hated that test. But it is one that you can definitely get better at. But it's a long process, and I would recommend doing when you're not at school if you can.
Yeah. I remember when Pilar was studying, because we were RAs together at summer, I think. And I was like, wow, these people are intense. And that actually like kind of kicked me off to start studying actually incrementally from like freshman, sophomore year, all the way through senior year when I ended up taking it. And I think that really works for my learning style. How early did I start? I would say between freshman and sophomore year, but it was not a consistent schedule. Like I've just found over time that I'm someone who really enjoys pacing myself and picking up the topics and using the skills over time. And just generally when it comes to law school, I find we have several more entrance exams that we have to take, even in addition to the bar. So the LSAT is really just the first of many. And I think what I took from it, even more than the content, was just the ability of like getting my brain to function that way and getting myself on long-term schedules and figuring out that time management. The entrance exam itself, the LSAT, like I just used Khan Academy. It was free. It was a really good resource, and it was something that I could, again, track my progress over time, and just it was reliable. So that's what I would recommend.
And for me, I took a test master's course, and I did take some time between undergrad and law school. So I definitely didn't study in undergrad at all for the LSAT. And I actually gave you all the advice before to reach out to mentors and ask what they did, but this was probably the one time where that was not effective for me. You actually don't know how you are going to respond to that test. And in my opinion, it's really something that you have to be taught and like learn how to take. Like it can take you a long time or it can take you a really short time. So I remember I was teaching, right? So the summer between my first and second year, a lot of people told me like, no problem, you'll be able to, learn it and take it in a month or two. And, the end of the summer came and my scores just still weren't where I expected them to be. So I ended up studying for a second summer. So I would say if you feel like maybe, well, I don't know, I think that does have to be a very personal decision, like when you want to start to take it. And I would say, it's more advantageous for you to give yourself more time to study than not. Because I remember for me, definitely too, it took me a really long time to get over a certain number, but once I started testing over that number, then it came much more quickly. So that is one case where I would say, don't listen to what everyone tells you. Everyone's experience with the test taking will be different, and definitely do give yourself as much time as you think you can.
Thank you very much. So let's talk a little bit more about how you chose school specifically. So how did you choose to attend your school? And what were you looking for academically, professionally, and socially when you were putting together your law school list and then ultimately choosing the school that you chose to attend?
I can start because I actually feel pretty strongly about this. I remember sophomore year of college, pre-law society had like a panel of admissions counselors come, and it was, the New York schools, Berkeley, and then like Penn. And I just was really drawn to the culture and the energy that the Berkeley representative had. That was something that definitely drew me to Barnard, was like just the energy and the community that you felt. And I felt like that really came through from her. And also just the idea of like being able to garner new experiences moving across the country. After, I'm originally from Georgia, so the move to New York was already something, but it wasn't as extensive. And so once I kind of had that realization, I went all in on Berkeley. I was like, this is the only place I'm going to apply to. I'm going to network with this specific, that admissions counselor. I spoke to her probably like every 3 months, like for 2 or 3 years, like not like being too intense, but just, popping in here and there. Like you don't always have something to say, but I feel like over time I was able to build a relationship with her, apply early decision, and they ended up giving me a really great scholarship offer. And I feel like just knowing what I wanted early in the game was really, really helpful. One, in terms of my focus and just goal setting again, so that I know what I was like going after. And two, just to make sure you know you're making the right decision, because I know that Columbia, not so much Barnard, but just the Columbia environment can be very intense and very stressful. And that was something I didn't want to continue going into grad school, because, you know, I just felt like you really earn your stripes at Barnard. Like, you develop the skills that you need. You're smart, like you made it. So at that point, it's really just about, like, as a whole person, what do you value and like, where do you want to be? So that's what I thought about when it came to schools.
I had a very different approach, so that's interesting. So I knew I wanted to work in big law, which is just, you know, law firms. And I knew that I needed to go to a school that would allow me to do that. And the brute reality is that you need to go to a good school, like very much top 14 or top 6 or whatever, to like get those jobs. And that's just how it works. And a lot of people told me this, and this really stuck with me. They're like, if you go to not a highest ranked school, you can still get it, but you need to be excellent, and you can be just okay in a top school and you get the job. And that's very much my experience. I'm very much okay in law school. I am not, you know, top 5% anything. So I really kind of, they call blanked the T14, which means I basically applied to almost all of them. Just the ones that I would never attend. I didn't apply, but I applied to almost all of them. And at the end of the day, it happened that NYU both gave me a good scholarship, but I got full rides that I declined because I was like, everyone was like, there's not even a choice. Like, I got into UCLA. And I was like, I have so many friends in LA, and I was like, I'm going to go to LA. It's going to be perfect. This is my life. I was looking at apartments, and then very late in the game, NYU was like, hey, come. And I was like, oh, damn, now I need to come. So my advice when choosing schools is always very bland and not fun, which is just do a math calculation of how much money and the ranking. And that's the 2 things you should look at if you want big law. And then if you want public interest, I'm sure Kayla has many thoughts, but I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I feel like my response is actually sort of a mix of both of yours. So similar to Jay, I was, like you said, you earned your stripes. Barnard was definitely very hard. It was a lot of work. It taught me, I feel like, a lot of things, like everything I needed. So Columbia Law School, like the people I had talked to, it just seemed very stressful there. And I was like, I really don't want to do this again. I went here once. I don't have anything to prove to anyone. So for like same reason NYU, I really chose it, a big piece for the community. It has like a reputation, I feel like, amongst all the law schools for being very collaborative, not as competitive, as of course all law schools they attract a certain type, right? And they're all competitive, but I do feel like NYU, I've met some like very genuinely nice and kind people here, and I don't feel like this weird competitive nature with my classmates. I feel like I've made so many friends across so many different backgrounds, so that's been great and definitely a part of the reason why I chose the school. But sort of going back to before I really sort of decided that was the place I wanted to go, very similar to Pilar, I knew that I didn't want to go anywhere outside the top 10. I was like very strict with that. And that also is going to dictate your approach when you are preparing, if you're applying. So for example, if you want to go to the top 10, that test score, like you can even find a little bit more flexibility in your GPA. So for example, I didn't have like a 3.8 or a 3.6, but I knew that my LSAT, it was just going to have to be a certain score. Like there's just kind of almost no way around it. It can be a little lower in that bank, but it still needs to sort of like reach a certain mark. So that that definitely directed sort of my approach to applying. And then I think what everyone else has said too. So it's a mixture of the rank, the environment, where you want to be physically. And yeah, I feel like NYU ended up sort of differentiating itself within that top 10 because of the community I found. And I also knew that even though I wanted to do big law and I wanted to do private practice, I really wanted to be in a place where I was getting really substantive public service or public interest opportunities. So it's like, I knew that I had those interests and I wanted to sort of cultivate both of them, like get the job, but also work for the NAACP and things like that. So I feel like I've been able to do both at the school that I chose. Not to say that you can't do some of these things at other schools, but I think NYU had like the best reputation for it, in my opinion. And the last thing I will say is I knew I wanted to go to school in New York City. I just think it's so fun to be here and go to school here, and I'm still partying, doing the same things I was doing in undergrad. So that was probably what really locked it in for me at NYU.
Thank you so much. So now, Pilar, I have a question specifically for you, unless Jay or Kayla also identify as international students. I want to know, can you talk about the role that played in your law school choice, being an international student?
So huge, mostly in going to law school. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Like I loved political science. I loved econ. And I was like, I want to do this forever, but I do not want to get a PhD. So I was like, I don't know what to do. And then my professor suggested law school. And I was like, I don't know why. I just never thought of it. I was just like, oh, I can do that. So I was like, okay, I need to look into it. And the truth is I want to stay in the US, and law school first gave me 3 years, but then Big Law is famous for being very generous in sponsoring visa and then sponsoring green cards. So I'll be honest, the first decision of going to law school was very much a practical one. I was like, okay, this is a way of me staying here that I can do, and I'll be okay. I'm very glad to say that I absolutely fell in love with it, and I'm like, I found myself. I'm so excited. But what I have to say about being an international student, it's fine. Like it's not like going to medical school, which is very, very hard to do as an international student. It's not the same. The funding thing, everyone, you will not be able to do federal loans, but you can definitely get a full ride. And you can definitely find other ways to do it. I mean, don't just discount it, just try it. And at the end, I find that things just kind of work out. So like I got 40% of scholarship for NYU, which is definitely not enough for me to attend because I couldn't take loans, right? So then I was like, okay, what do I do? So then I actually reached out in Brazil and I was like, hey, I'm going to law school. And then these two rich dudes decide to pay for it. So that's literally what it is. It's a scholarship, but I just say they are just two rich dudes. And it worked out. So it's definitely possible. And there's a lot of law students that are international, especially at NYU. There's a lot of LLM students. So you're definitely not going to be the only one. And at the job market, if you want to do big law, you're good to go. They didn't even ask me when they were hiring me. Like they don't care truly. Public interest, a little more mixed. So definitely be more careful with that because like you can't work for the federal government. So you have to know that. And there's a bunch of stuff. Someone asked, what scholarship opportunity is more competitive? So no, because they are in law school. I think NYU is actually not, but most law schools are merit-based. So they don't really care what your background is. I think NYU is NIT-based, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. But I don't think so. I think you'll be fine. It's different than undergrad, I'll tell you that.
I would say that for anybody who's an international student worried about scholarships and financial aid, reaching out to the admissions office directly to ask questions about that is going to be very helpful. So don't be afraid to reach out. Okay, so we're going to switch gears and talk about inside the classroom. Can you all tell us a little bit about the classes that you took in your 1L year?
We took the same ones, spoiler alert.
Yeah. I guess your first year, you're taking what they call as doctrinal classes. They're classes that are tested on the bar exam. So those courses, you might take them in various semesters, but it tends to be contracts, civil procedure, criminal law, what am I forgetting? Constitutional law, maybe,
Torts.
Or property. Torts is a core class. So those are the 5 or so classes that every law student is going to take within their first year.
And yeah, one thing I didn't know, like, it's funny to think about all this research and things I did to get to law school. Like I literally showed up And I was like, oh, they literally choose your classes for you your first semester. So they choose the students that you're going to take your classes with. So that's what we call sections. So if we have 300 students in the class, they're going to divide you into like however many sections, and then you go to all of your classes with those same, let's say you have 80 people in your section, those same 80 people for your entire first year, actually. So at NYU, we take 6 doctrinal classes and 1 legal writing class. And these are things, once again, I kind of was so shocked. I did all this research and went to law school and didn't know that happened. So for example, this could influence, once again, the kind of school you want to go to, because NYU, for example, we take 6 doctrinals, 1 legal writing course. Our legal writing course isn't graded. You may not find that at some other top 10 schools, right? Maybe people have to take 7 doctrinal classes in their first year, right? That's going to impact your workload and like your day-to-day life for an entire year. But in all cases, your classes you will be placed into your doctrinal classes with the same students from your section for the entire first year. So just once again, for example, I thought I was going to NYU and I was going to take a particular criminal law professor, and that's just not how it works. You can't like ask or request to be switched. I ended up loving my criminal law professor, but it's just something I wish I would have known.
Yeah, what I would say is that now as a 2L, I view very much 1L was like a thing, and then the other 2 years of law school are a completely different thing, because the first year is where your grades matter. So like everyone is really stressed because they want to get your job, because you actually get your job if you're doing big law. You get your job between the summer of your first year and second year. So the only grades that really matter are your first years. So everyone's really stressed about that. You also don't know how to do law school, which I found very different in undergrad. Like by the end of undergrad, I was like, I can do a political science course with my eyes closed. Like I just really got it down. And then I got to law school and I had to relearn how to do everything. So my first year definitely was a learning experience. The readings are truly way more than college, and just different vibe. I don't know if you're going to ask about this, but one thing that is different in law school is, and it will be different by class, by professor, by school, it's always kind of different, but it's how you're going to get called in class, which is very famous in law school. So the most savage way is cold calling, which they don't tell anyone in the class. And so it's like 80 people and they just go like, so can you tell me about the facts? And they look at the names, Miss Ferreira, where are you? And then you're like, hi. And then you say the facts of the case. So you need to be prepared because you never know. And you don't want to bomb a cold call. Like it doesn't matter, but it doesn't feel good. Or you can be in a panel, which is they tell you like, hey, you're going to be cold called on this day. So it's like much better because then you can study for that day and you're like, I know this case so well. And then another thing about classes that I just want to mention that, again, you should do your research about it because it's really important, is that I would say 99.9% of our classes, our grades are only our final. So like we are not graded the entire semester, and then we take one final worth 100%, which is a very intense and different way to do school than like Barnard, where you get like little bits, right?
Yeah, I think since we kind of started to talk about that, and I especially want to hear from you, Jay, because you are not at NYU. What are some differences that you've seen between college and law school?
Yeah, there's a lot, like Pilar mentioned. I think the idea of legal reasoning is completely different than even the political science track that we learned of, like, picking up different facts. In a way, it seems like it would be similar. Like I thought it'd be the same. Like, you do your research, you feel these facts, you say, oh, this is the background of this. So this is how, this is my recommendation for the situation, is my analysis. And like, we had that down doing poli-sci at Barnard, but there's something about the identification of facts and issues and how you apply rules to certain situations, that you're just really learning to think in the gray area. And I think, yeah, that's 1L. And then going forward, especially at Berkeley, we have so many practical courses, and that is a huge draw for me because Another reason I wanted to come is because I'm very interested in startups and venture capital. And this is, the Bay Area is the hub for all of that Web3, everything. So just having like general counsels of these huge crypto companies come and teach us a class on blockchain. And like, once you actually understand the frame of thinking, I think that's a huge difference. In law school versus undergrad.
Yeah, and I would say it's almost very hard to articulate the difference because you sort of, I feel like the LSAT teaches your brain to think in a different way, and then law school teaches your brain to think in a different way. And I've heard that even the bar is like another step, and you just have to really like train your brain to think on just train it to think in the way in which the law dictates. And it's a very specific way that, once again, I would find it difficult to put words to, that is different than undergrad for sure. Another thing that is, in my opinion, with law school, like a difference between college and law school, is in both places you'll find yourself working very hard. What you'll find in law school, you can have 80 students all put in the same amount of effort, but it won't necessarily equate to an A or a B plus or whatever it may be in undergrad. I feel like in undergrad, when I put my best foot forward and I worked super hard, if like let's say I didn't like my grade on like one of our response papers, I could, figure out some way to get that grade up by the end of the semester. And law school is really crazy in that you may work super duper hard and that may not be directly reflected in all of your grades. It's like almost like a science that I feel like every time I take a new class, I'm trying to figure out how to like, crack the code on that one class. So it's like, if for any of you who may have started studying for the LSAT and maybe like sometimes it just feels like why am I always getting these questions wrong? That's kind of how law school feels. Like, I will leave every class and I will be confused, and that's fine. Like, that's just sort of the way it is. And, you build these skills over time, but it's just a very like niche and unique way of thinking. And it just takes time, I think, to really get the hang of it.
Definitely agree with that. It's a lot, and law schools are graded on a curve. You might have heard a little bit of a curve, and I know some classes at Columbia have a curve, but in law school it's really intense. So basically, at least at NYU, our curve, 60% of people will get a B, between a B and a B plus. 60% of people get that. So you kind of have to go in with the knowing that there's a more than not chance that you will get a B. So I think that was, for me, something I had to be very humble about, because in, final years of college, I was doing really well. And then I came to law school and I knew from the questions people asked and just the vibe that I was like, I'm not getting an A. Like, this is just not happening. And people say that 1L is really stressful, but my recommendation is that if you come in with that mindset of like, this is hard and the numbers are stacked against me, like, you literally, the class will not let you all get an A. It's easier to deal with. And then another thing that Professor Zargami, if anyone has taken econ of gender, she told me once about econ, and I think it applies to law school, is that you have to face it as if you're learning a new language. There's going to be a lot of words and terms and things that you just don't understand, and you just have to know that it's not your fault and it's not because you're doing badly. It's just like a new language. And then the more you see it, I remember, so civil procedure is something we learned in our first year, and it's really hard, famously. But then now I look at the cases I learned, and all the cases can involve civil procedure because, it's everywhere. And I'm like, this is obvious. Like, obviously they can't sue the person that is not in the jurisdiction. Like, it just makes sense. So you'll get there eventually. But yeah, it's just come with a clean mindset that it's not going to be Barnard 2.0.
Thank you. Ooh,
I actually
ahead.
want to jump in with one thing that sort of ties in all these themes of like school and grades, is you do want to educate yourself. For example, if you want to look in the top 10, educate yourself on the grading system for each one of those schools. So for example, if you go to NYU, it's in the top 10, but as Pilar mentioned, you can get like 60% of the class is likely or is going to get a B, between a B plus and a B minus. So even from there, when you're going to actually look for jobs, a lot of jobs want to see that you have a 3.3 or a 3.4 to actually get the big law job. Now, there are definitely cases where that's not so strict and it doesn't apply that way. But all of that is to say, like, you want to have a good sense of, okay, am I going to pick a school where I have to get a certain GPA to really get the job that I want? This is also compared to like a place like Harvard, where they don't have grades, but they have like high pass, low pass, or like medium pass, right? Like it shows actually, it doesn't give a letter grade, but it basically shows if you like passed well, passed medium, or passed like poorly. And that will also impact your job prospects versus Stanford and Yale do not give grades at all. Once you get in, you go, and that's it. So, you want to have a sense of how that works, that grading system works for different schools, because that may also impact where you want to go and the kind of environment you want to be in.
I guess as a Cal student, I can jump in on that too, because we have kind of a hybrid of both of what you described with NYU and almost not having grades at all. We have 60% of the class passes, then 30% gets honors, and top 10% get high honors. But then when it comes to the hiring process, I'm going big law to very corporate transactional. I'm basically coming back to New York to do Wall Street stuff, but like it did not matter. My grades did not matter in the slightest. Like they cared about who I was. What I feel law is like almost like an art form. It's a skill set that you're building. And so you're going to take this 8-hour exam at the end of the semester that counts for 90% of your grade. And it may or may not reflect how well you're actually able to advocate for somebody, how well you're able to research and figure out the answers that you need to know the answers to. So I guess that also goes into like picking a good school, like you said, top 10, but like also focusing on the why. Like everything here is just about the why and your reasoning. And you're smart. Like you guys are already, I'm sure, smart. I can't even see your face, but like I feel like you're capable. You just have to find different ways to demonstrate that capacity. I feel like grades matter a lot less in law school than they do in undergrad, but also that probably has to do with the school.
And just, sorry, we keep adding stuff, but just to make something a little more explicit. So I'm a nosy person. So my law firm sent like, oh, here's all the people that are going to be in the summer with you. And it was like a sheet and it had all their schools. And I was like, I'm going to do some math. So 75, it was like 200 people. 75% of people went to a T14. And it's in New York. And then 50% of that 75% of people went to the top 6 schools. So I'm telling you this to tell you that your school will carry your grades very much forward. So they discount it a lot. They look at the school and they're like, whatever. This person got into this place. Like, I don't care if they know a little less criminal law than a random other person. So that's why I'm very adamant about carefully choosing your school.
Thank you. This is all really good information. Before we go into the Q&A portion, I want to ask Kayla, because I know you've had a less direct path to law school. I want to know about how was your transition from the working world into law school?
Sure. So I'll actually speak to, I knew that I wanted to go to law school in undergrad, but I wanted to be a little bit more competitive before I applied. And I actually was like, I was tired after undergrad. I wanted a little bit of time before I jumped into law school, because once again, I had heard everything about how important grades are. And I just wanted to make sure like everything was going to go well once I got there. So, a lot of my extracurricular activities in undergrad, I had been working with students or doing some sort of facilitation or presentation work. So I ended up joining Teach for America and going back to Baltimore to teach. So I think for those of you who may be considering taking gap years or taking time off, one thing that I really had to make sure I was like certain on my goals and my vision, because once I left, especially because I went to teach, right? It's just like a completely alternate universe. Like people there, you say you're going to law school and they're probably looking at you like, what is she talking about? You know, but like I had a very clear purpose. Like I left to gain professional skills, to get time to probably just like grow up a little bit in a personal manner, which is what, once again, that was just like my personal preference for what I wanted for myself. But I had to be like very certain on like this, I'm doing this for a purpose. And that also just, yeah, it just impacted how I navigated my time outside of law school. So I was doing things like making sure to reach back to professors to be like, hey, you know, this is what I'm doing now, but I'm still planning to go to law school. I would love to stay in touch, you know, hopefully, you know, I was basically asking people for recommendations 2 years before I even applied, because it's like, you really have to like play the long game, and you have to, you know, remain very like sturdy on your mission. In terms of like maybe skills or anything like that, I think working a job, well, I think being a teacher is a really hard job. So I feel like it gave me a lot of skills that really, you know, helped me navigate the difficulties of law school. And I anticipate are going to be really helpful in just allowing me to navigate being an attorney. I'm like losing my train of thought. But yes, I think my advice would just to be like, remain steadfast. If that's what you want to do, don't let all these like outside forces in the world like get in the way. Do what you can to like stay in touch with your mentors and everybody, to just remind yourself why you're doing it. And I think it will just, you know, if anything, change your application a little bit, because right, you don't want, I wouldn't have wanted to work at a school for 2 years and then I have 2 recommendations from professors from undergrad, right? Like I spent 2 years doing something else, so I should probably have recommendations from my time there. And I also, you know, it changed my personal statement a little bit. So I decided to talk about what I did after I worked, instead of, you know, speaking about something that pertained to my life before that. So just, I think just being strategic, making sure that you're constructing a good narrative. And I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you. All right, now we're going to open it up to audience questions. So if you have a question, you can raise your little hand and unmute yourself. Or you can, like I said in the chat, you can feel free to DM if you don't want to have your voice recorded. Okay, Amaya, thank you.
Hi, I just want to thank everybody like for like the amazing and such helpful information. So I just have a quick question about basically like when I should start preparing for law school. Like I know you guys like touched on it a little bit, but I'm a first year right now. And I know some of you said you started like your sophomore year or even going into sophomore year. But I plan on taking a gap year when I graduate from undergrad, just so I can get like a little break from the academic lifestyle and hopefully like get a job or an internship throughout that gap year. But yeah, I was just kind of wondering like when you think like I should start studying, or like looking out to places like where I could study, or like books I should like buy. That would be helpful.
I would say for now, you should focus on getting the best GPA that you can. Like this is like, you should treat it as your job. You're going to be grateful that you know, knew that at that time. As I said, build relationships with professors, and I wouldn't worry about the LSAT. If you're taking a full gap year, I wouldn't try to put too much on yourself. Just treat school as your job and do it really well. And then you know, I was the opposite of Kayla. So I had a really high GPA and a mediocre LSAT. So that's also a path. So the highest you get your GPA, the less pressure LSAT will have. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I would say since you're so early in the process, same thing, definitely your grades will end up doing a lot of work for you. And yeah, you know, I was the opposite. I didn't feel like my grades were super strong. So I tried to make those other pieces of my application like super duper strong. But like, for example, if you feel like you're a really strong test taker, maybe you can wait till your junior or senior year, or if you're fine to just not touch the LSAT at all until you graduate and take your gap year, that's fine too. But if you feel like, if you are a person who feels like really intimidated by a test or something, you know, maybe maybe try to take a course, or, you know, at least even just open a book, or like figure out what the problems look like and things like that earlier, like junior year or senior year. But once again, I know I definitely did take a class. Some people do self-study. Once again, I was a person where I was like, I know I cannot self-study for this and get the score that I want. So I think that is really a personal choice. So I feel like you should definitely, you know, check in with yourself, like how you feel like you would be in approaching the test and things like that, and decide from there and sort of make yourself a projected plan and timeline. It's also super early, so you can change your timeline. Maybe in 2 years, you will know you want to go to law school right after undergrad. You never know. So, you know, the earlier you look, technically, the more options you have in that sense.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add to that is like, I think the easiest way to figure out where you're at is just to sit down one weekend and take a practice test. Like, see how familiar, even if you don't pre-study for it, just see, you know, how the test makes you feel, and then you can best decide what you feel is necessary to go from there. And Khan Academy, again, free resource, so that's great.
Yes, when you sign up for your LSAT, you do get access to Khan Academy. So that's a great free resource. All right, so we have a question in the chat. Was wondering, as folks of color, sorry, it moved. Folks of color in law school, what has the experience been like engaging in a different type of PWI? Have you felt supported? Have you found community and support at Berkeley and NYU?
I'd say one thing about law school is that the overall class tends to be smaller, and like the school as a whole is significantly smaller. So everything that you have like in undergrad is like scaled down. Even thinking about Barnard, I think there's 300 people total. Let me not say that because I could be completely wrong. But there's less people, absolutely. And so in finding community also, there's people that are coming from even more different walks of life. You know, in undergrad, everyone's kind of usually around 18, or they're in GS, and that's a different situation. So I think there is community, and there's definitely cultural relevance, and like Berkeley also is just like known for being this intellectual hippie, like everyone does their own thing type of place. So I think on a broader scale, everyone is kind of finding their niche in a place where they feel supported. But also, you know, it's been 2020, and you know, everyone has maybe felt more isolated and in a different space. So I would say it's about the same, to be honest. It's just a different context.
And I'll just, you know, go off of that. I think for me, law school did feel, I would say definitely the Black community at NYU was definitely like a huge reason why I wanted to go there. We actually, fun fact, were the first BALSA, so that's like the Black Law Students Association, and they have chapters for every school. We were the first one ever founded, so that's always nice to have that rich history. But no, in more seriousness, yes, the BALSA community at NYU, I feel like will lift you up. Like, it just does not matter. You meet anyone outside, like they're just very approachable. They want to talk, they want to help you. And then I feel like internally, like within the current students, I feel like at Columbia and Barnard, there definitely was a little bit more competitiveness, or, you know, sometimes, I mean, we're younger. I think that's a good point. So maybe even sometimes a little bit of cattiness, a little bit, but I just haven't experienced that here. I feel like everyone's very down to earth. They're very down to lift you up. People are checking on you. They want to know how you're doing. They just want to see you win. Like, everyone's just really nice. And it's like, it's just different. It feels different to me. And then two, I feel like there have been a lot of great networking opportunities across different groups of color, which is nice. So I feel like my friend group is more diverse in law school than it was in undergrad as well. So, and I feel like NYU specifically, they have, for example, we have like a whole alumni association dedicated to students of color. So, but it's like, instead of going to an alumni event for just, you know, one type of person of color student, we all go together. So it's supposed to be the same idea. Like, I can reach across the aisle to somebody who's a different, you know, identifies as a different sort of type of person of color, and still get the same expectation that they will lift me up, and vice versa. It's always going to be a PWI space, but, you know, I feel like the experience has been a little bit more positive for me in law school.
Yeah, the interest groups and identity groups are really a key part of law school support for me. So I'm part of LALSA, and I get my outlines, which is like your study guide from LALSA. I did like they do 1,000 events, like prep mock interview talk. Like I had an event this semester that I loved was we talked to Latina partners in big law, and it was just very inspiring for me. So they are really like a built-in like older people that will help you. Like you get into the group chat and you can send anything like, should I take evidence with Capra, which is a class for both in, and then you'll be a bunch of 2Os being like, yes, you should take it, it's horrible. So that has been really nice. I didn't have that in Barnard, but so for me it's kind of new.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely a core pillar of my law school experience too. It's just being in these organizations and getting specifically the notes and like the outlines and the MO on like what other professors are doing and how they teach. That's crucial. And I think, you find alignment in that, like you said, through affinity groups, like Black law students, women students, business students, like whatever, your identity calls for, like, yeah, that's a big resource.
All right, so we're going to wrap this up with just one last thing, and it would be, what advice would you give current Barnard students who are interested in attending law school? Like your one sentence, like, this is the big thing. I think you all have given amazing advice so far, but if you were like, this is it, I have one tweet, what is your 240 characters of advice for Barnard law students?
So we just spent an hour giving y'all advice, but my biggest piece of advice is to take everyone's advice with a grain of salt. It's your experience, it's your life. In the legal profession, you will have people tell you not to be a lawyer. They'll tell you how to do X, Y, and Z. And like certain things are true, but you can literally do what you want. Like you can network and hustle and grind your way into every opportunity. I really believe that. So take everyone's advice with a grain of salt.
Mine would be just one thing that I read online 1,000 times when I was a senior that haunt my dreams. That it was like, don't go to law school unless you're sure you want to go to law school. I read that in so many places, and that's not true. Like, I find it very hard to say that you could say with 100% certainty, I want to go to law school if you've never studied law. Like, how could you say that? Like, you don't know what you're saying. So it's okay to not be 100% sure, if you just, but no one will go through the LSAT, through applying, through all this if you didn't want to go. So like, trust yourself. And there's so many things a lawyer can do that even if you hate like lawyering exactly, there's so many other things you can do with this degree. So it's fine, just go.
Yeah, I guess my word of advice would just be, you guys, you're capable, you can do it. Just focus on your why. Reach out. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There are so many people in the Barnard community, and just like, I'm sure in your personal communities, that want to see you win and want to see you happy. So just focus on your why and keep pushing.
All right, thank you all so much. Thank you, Jaden. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Pilar. This was amazing. I learned a lot. I hope everybody in the chat also learned a lot. Thank you all for sharing your email addresses in the chat. And I will be in touch shortly to everybody on this whole chat with the recording. And a thank you again for our alumni who have shared their experiences. I hope everybody, all of you all, because you're all taking finals, I hope everybody does very well. And I hope to see you all again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.